Okay, just finished solo ronda, so I'm just getting prepared, and I'll be doing this next ride. Which is part of my pre-planned or scheduled workouts. There's no indication of whether this is going to be a hard, fast, threshold type ride or just an easy recovery workout. We've added quite a few extra virtual riders for some drafting benefit. And then once this ride's been completed, I will do a final recovery downhill. The audio when it starts is from the 2013 Vuelta a España, stages 19 and 21.
For the general classification, probably more for a breakaway today.
And we are now live here on stage 19, and this is our second group on the road, a fairly large group. They are in pursuit of two riders at the very front of the stage right now, Edvald Wassenhagen and Georg Preidler. They were in an 18-man breakaway earlier. Wassenhagen and Preidler dropped everybody else. Now those are the two out front. This group here is chasing, and
so
everyone
get back on the
still
bike.
a few minutes ahead of the main field. Three climbs at stake here on stage 19. Of course, the red jersey battle, and also the battle for that final spot on the podium between Alejandro Valverde and Joaquim Rodriguez. So a lot up in the air going into this final weekend. Just caught a glimpse of our two leaders, and the main field here, single file, over 3 minutes back. It contains all of the top contenders, and there's not many of them left at this point in the Vuelta, with under 37 kilometers left to go on the final Friday. Edvald Wassenhagen here in the dark. Georg Preidler of the Argo Shimano team in the white. Wassenhagen just missed out on a stage win several days ago when he was beaten in an uphill sprint by Philippe Gilbert, who's no longer in the race. But Team Sky finally got their first elusive win of this year's Vuelta when Vasil Kirienka won from a solo move yesterday on stage 18.
Well, Steve, this has been a brutally fast stage so far. They're about 30 minutes ahead of the fastest predicted pace on the day, as this thing has just been off the hook so far. Preidler and Wassenhagen trying to stay in front of that large group of chasing riders, and then the peloton back at 3:06. And these two guys doing a great job out in front of a large chasing group.
And they are on the first of the three categorized climbs, the Cat 3 San Emiliano, that will summit with 32.7 kilometers left to go in the stage. Two Cat 3s, one Cat 2 on the profile for stage number 19 that heads west along the Atlantic Ocean in Cantabria, and never ventures far from the coast all day long. And it is a beautiful Friday, sunny skies, warm temperatures. He did say that he believes Horner is looking good to win the race. Now, he hasn't gone as far as saying that he will, because he has to try and talk himself into some kind of positive energy over these next few days to somehow hang on to those precious few seconds. But Nibali understands the situation.
Yeah, well, he's got to. And when the climbing gets really tough, Nibali has been in trouble. Horner has been by far the best climber in the steep mountains. And there's a big difference between the steep mountains and the other mountains. The steeper it is, the slower the pace, the less draft there is. And that's when Horner is able to make his separation from Nibali, because the draft does not allow Nibali to make up the difference in strength.
You don't often see a Grand Tour or a stage race in general where you have this sense of inevitability, this impending sense of what is going to happen, that the leader is likely going to lose the race. But based on what we have seen these last several days, where the racing has been at its most real, that's what we're looking at right now. That Nibali, even though he's led more than anybody else, he's led over 12 days in a row, you feel that he's going to lose the race. That's the general consensus.
It really is. And, you know, throughout the course of this race, when Horner has picked up the leader's jersey and then lost it on 2 different occasions, and when I've talked with him and he said, well, you know what? It's not that big a deal. My team, Radio Shack, does not have to defend. I've got good legs. I'm going to try and get it back later. It was so hard to just take that from Chris and say, well, all right, I guess, you know, it makes sense. I mean, it does make sense. If you have great legs and your legs are so good that you have the confidence that you can get back to the time. But when he was 50 seconds down after the time trial, then we knew it was going to be a big fight.
So this is the Horner-Nibali group, the main field here, that is now inside of 3 minutes behind our 2 leaders, who have a gap of just over 2 minutes on a pretty decent-sized chasing group. They were all together at one point before Wassenhagen and Pryther went out on their own. And our 2 leaders just about to the summit of the day's first climb, the Emiliano. From there, they'll drop down to the second intermediate sprint before the second climb. That summits with 12.5K to go. And then the last climb of the day starts with just under 6K remaining and goes up to a summit finish. And indeed, Wassenhagen and Pryther have gone over the summit, and the clock counting now to the next group that will go over. Now you consider where Horner has lost time in this race, and if you figure that, okay, he lost about 1.5 minutes in the time trial, also lost a few seconds in that weird stage in week 1 where they counted a time gap that cost him the red jersey, saying that Nibali was in a group that finished just ahead of Horner. You add those 2 together. Let's say he doesn't have that gap. Let's say he manages a better time trial. Horner would have a pretty sizable lead going into the final weekend in the red jersey instead of trailing by these 3 seconds.
Well, yeah, purely on time, that's true. A day now attacking that group, trying to get some mountain points in that classification. It's true if you look purely at the finish times every day, but you also got to remember that it changes the tactics of the bike race. So Horner's team has not had to ride on the front all day. And by contrast, Astana and Nibali's team have had to be on the front all day long, day after day. So his team is pretty thrashed right now.
But when have we really seen Astana as a full team riding at the front? Another team has always taken up the pacemaking because of something that's going on in that particular stage, whether it's been Movistar or one of the other teams. They've always come to the front. Astana's gotten a free ride on a lot of occasions, actually.
Well, and Steve, as obviously a day really going for the mountain points there. We just saw him, the 2 guys off the front. He's trying to get the 3rd spot. We have seen Astana at times on the front. And the other thing you got to realize is, and he is going to get the 3rd spot, it looks like. The other thing is, before we get the images on the feed, there's a lot happening in the bike race the first 2 or 3 hours, right? We're only seeing the last 1.5 hours, 2 hours of the bike race. And his team has to do a lot of work early to try and keep things close. And then maybe later on in the race, the teams with other ambitions come to the front and ride. And here's another thing. There's also the recovery aspect. After every single stage, if you're the race leader, you have about 1 hour to 1.5 hours of obligations with the press conferences, all these different interviews and so on, and so you don't get as much recovery there. So that hurts Nibali. That's all stuff that Chris talked about when he lost the jersey. He said, you know what, he doesn't have to worry about all the media, he doesn't have to worry about his team riding on the front. He can just go back to the hotel, get a meal in, get a massage, start getting his sleep, all that stuff.
the updated King of the Mountain standings after the first of 3 climbs today. And we always hear about the obligations, the podium, all of the interviews that the leader has to do. But if you look back at a lot of the Grand Tours in recent history, that's always been the case. That never changes. But yet, the Grand Tour leader, no matter what race it's been, hasn't been compromised because of it.
I totally disagree.
Well,
we don't know that the leader was not compromised.
Well, my point is, in the final week, we haven't seen a leader falter like Nibali has this way. That's my point.
Yeah, well, I think that's a pretty good point. However, I mean, I
understand it probably takes something away.
It does.
But we haven't seen it to this degree. Maybe I'll clarify it by saying that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Nibali's faltering is purely based on the obligations as the race leader. I think that it just adds to the troubles he's having. I mean, let's look back. You and I have talked about this at length, how coming into this race, his director said, well, let's not mince any words, that he was fat.
Right.
Well, I mean, okay, Nibali's not fat. He's never fat. But for a professional cyclist, I mean, these guys are talking about a couple of pounds making a difference. So he came in, he took a month off a little bit after the Giro, after a whirlwind of all these sponsor obligations when he won the Giro. Then he started racing again. And at the Tour of Poland, he was nowhere. And that was not long before the Vuelta. So we knew that Nibali was going to be questionable coming in. I actually thought that Valverde was the #1 guy coming into the race. Well, Chris Horner has certainly silenced me on that, as he has just come out swinging in this Vuelta.
And it's hard to quantify exactly how much something takes out of a certain rider, how much a previous race either adds to their form or maybe builds fatigue in their legs. You look at the various components and you say, okay, this might do this, that might do that. But until you get in the race, you really don't know, because every rider was so different.
Yeah, and it's all intangible. There's no way to measure the impact of any of this stuff on a rider. You know, psychologically, physically, everything else. You know, we've talked about how a couple of days ago when Chris Horner called me up, he said, you know, it was midnight. And we were talking on the phone about his race, because that's when he had just finished dinner. I mean, they're on these crazy schedules, the travel, the race, the travel before the stage, the travel after the stage, to get all the way around the country. The guys are exhausted in so many ways by this point in the bike race.
Well, right now it is Katusha at the front of the field. Our 2 leaders, 27 kilometers from the finish, chasing group 2 minutes back. That is Kreidler and Wassenhagen, the 2 men up front on stage 19. That is the face of Edvald Wassenhagen of Team Sky, part of a 2-man leading group right now with a 2.5-minute lead on the main field. As we go to Twitter for the first time today, and her asking if Todd Gagolski here ever hears Philip Paul commenting on his performance when he's out riding a tough climb. Of course, Philip Paul, 2 voices of the sport, Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwin, for the last several decades. So I guess the question is, Gogo, do you hear their voices in your head when you're out banging up a climb?
Well, Herb, I have to chuckle with that question. You know, I do once in a while, and those guys, I grew up listening to them call bike races. In fact, bike races I was even in. And one year at the Great Philly race that was the U.S. Pro Championship for so many years, we watched the race afterwards on TV, and I just remember them saying about my teammate David Farmer, David Farmer really on the form now. And I swear, for the next 3 or 4 years, we would say that to David Farmer. So yeah, it's you know, they do have a way of getting into your head. And also, 2011 Tour de France, when I was working with Phil Liggett, we went out for a bit of a bike ride, and unfortunately we don't have that picture to show you, but let's just say we had a great time riding around the Alps together on that day. Both of us, after 2 weeks not putting a leg over a bike and then going out riding around, he totally thrashed it, actually.
Phil will do that. He'll talk a good game, and then all of a sudden, boom.
Then he'll ride a good game, exactly. He lets his legs do the talking as well.
Keep the Twitter questions coming at BeachyGoGo, #LaVuelta for these final 3 days. This is the group between our 2 leaders and the field. Biggest name in here is the guy in the blue and white polka dot jersey, and that is Nicholas Day, leader of the King of the Mountains competition. So Day, the Frenchman, trying to maintain his spot for these final 2 mountain stages to win that competition at the end of the Vuelta. Now back to the main field, things being led by Katusha. That is the team, of course, of Joaquin Rodriguez and Danny Moreno. Now Moreno was just outside the top 10 on the GC. He's sitting 11th, so he'd like to move back up into a top 10 spot. Joaquin Rodriguez, who's sitting 4th, still has visions of potentially moving into the top 3 and finishing on the podium here at his home Grand Tour. But Rodriguez would also like to win a stage. He's missed out to this point. Typically, he would have won a stage at the Vuelta by now. Instead, it's been Moreno, the only Spaniard who's won a stage so far. He has won 2 here in the Vuelta this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a big battle, especially tomorrow. And some people have already predicted that Rodriguez and Moreno would go 1-2 tomorrow. I will not mention who that predictor is, but I actually don't see that happening. I just feel like Rodriguez, I certainly don't see Moreno in top 2 tomorrow. Maybe Rodriguez.
23 kilometers now left to go, so about 2K away from the second of the 2 intermediate sprints, and then the second of the 3 climbs starts with 16 kilometers left in the stage.
Okay, so you got about another 15K or so.
And notice the Astana man in that breakaway group taking a really hard pull at the end. Why is he doing that? Well, because Katusha is leading the field and chasing, so he wants to make it hard on those guys.
That group is about to be caught by the peloton, which would leave just 2 riders out front at this point. Coming up on the sprint, and then the Cat 3 and Cat 2 still to come in the final 22.5 kilometers of the stage. Katusha riding out front here. And that's okay for Vincenzo Nibali's team. Also for Chris Horner's Radio Shack team, Movistar, after doing so much of the hard riding at the front of the field yesterday to try and bring back the breakaway. Everybody seems content with where things are right now as far as the top riders in the overall standings, as a Lotto Belisol rider is going to now go off the front. Counterattack after the group was caught.
Remember, 2 men still off the front, but sometimes guys want to see if they can sort of upset things in the bunch just a little bit. Getting across a 2-minute gap by yourself, well, that's a big ask, but maybe a couple of guys come up to you, and then you can ride across.
Now, Lotto Belisol with only 4 riders left here in the Vuelta from the 9 that started, losing 5 along the way. One of 4 different teams that have lost at least 5 riders.
That's just the way it's been. Dennis Van den Dert, 3 hours down in the classification. You notice the blue physio tape all over his right knee for little strains and pulls. It just kind of gives you that little bit of support. And you see a lot of athletes using that in the sport of cycling now. In fact, they even put it on their back and places under their jersey that you can't see because they have these little strains and pulls.
All right, so more riders going off the front of the field now. Van den Dert there on the left-hand side of the screen going out of the frame. As other riders are trying to get out ahead of the game here. As they come into the town of the second intermediate sprint, El Padrón. And our 2 leaders, who we're not seeing at the moment, Wassenhagen and Preidler, 1 kilometer away from the sprint. Van den Dert here, ahead of the field and ahead of this next group.
This is exactly what Van den Dert wanted. Draw out a few guys, nobody who's dangerous for the general classification. The field says, not worth the effort to bring them back. We got a massive day tomorrow. Yeah, today's a summit finish, but it's only a category 2, 3.5 mile climb. So these guys may be given a little bit of leash to ride away for the stage win.
Himself trying to put himself in position to win the 3rd stage of the race for the team here today.
That's going to be tough to beat Edvald Boassenhagen on a finish like this because he's a good climber and he's got a really good finish in a sprint. But Preidler's a pretty good climber too, so if they make it to the finish together, he knows that he's going to have to try and drop Edvald before the line.
All right, look at these two groups coming together.
And the front group all loaded up with Astana men, and so all kinds of separation that we really didn't see happening. All of a sudden, we've got a bunch of different groups on the road.
But these groups here that are coming together also have this group that is just a few seconds behind. So a lot of this could come together for one big group here before we know it.
That's what I would expect. I don't expect those two groups to stay apart for long.
And just inside of a minute back to the main field. Now, very interesting day for the breakaways. We've seen so many different groups on the road. Even before we came on the air, there was a large group of almost 20, and that's from where our two leaders emerged, Edvald Boassenhagen and Georg Preidler. Here they are right now. And they are on the climb, 15K to go to the finish, and just about 2.5 kilometers away from the summit of this Cat 3 climb. Chasing group behind them here. The main field as well, and look at these groups scattered on the road leading to the end of stage 19. Live coverage of stage 19 of the Vuelta a España presented by Your Buds here on Universal Sports. Steve Schlanger with Todd Gogolski. We have two riders out front, 14K from the finish, a lead of just about 1 minute on the main field. Edvald Boassenhagen and Georg Preidler. Other groups on the road, some coming back, others going forward. There was a group split off behind the peloton that has regained contact with the field. There is still another group that is behind our two leaders. It's been one of the most active days in terms of various groups out on the road. Multiple groups. Some getting bigger, some getting smaller. Hard to keep track of exactly who is where at this point because it's changing so quickly. What we do know is this is the front of the main field, led by Katusha, followed by Astana. And now within 1 minute of our two leaders, who are coming up to the summit of the second of 3 categorized climbs on the day. The summit at 12.5K left to go to the finish.
And this is that group in between. This has Arata for Movistar, Charel for AG2R, Charuca's in there, Angel Mate, Verdugo, Van Mendez. It's another large group. And looks like guys coming apart a little bit on that one, and 3 men making their way up
to Preidler and Boassenhagen. So
this is Arata coming up for Movistar. He's got Juan Antonio Flecha on his wheel on the left. And the Euskaltel rider there is Gorka Verdugo joining Preidler and Boassenhagen. Now we have a group of 5. But Steve, let's think back to the peloton a minute ago. It was blown apart. These are category 3 climbs. The guys are tired at this point in the bike race.
So 5 riders now at the front, but leading the peloton by inside of 1 minute. There is the main field, bottom left-hand corner of your screen. But the gaps have never gotten very big between any of the groups on the road. Really no more than 3 minutes at any point today, and usually it's been within 2 minutes. Now our 5-man leading group have a lead of under a minute on this main field. Trying to do this whole final climb solo, just the way Vasil Kirienka did yesterday for Team Sky to win their first stage of the race.
Unfortunately for Jose Mendez, with only a 35-second advantage, it's a much bigger ask to stay away from the pursuit on the final climb.
Half a minute with just over 3 kilometers left to go. As that main field has brought some time back, almost slicing their deficit in half in the last kilometer or so. Who from that chase group is going to make the move here? Who's going to go across and try and get him? There's the peloton just behind this group here, working their way around that corner.
Just under 2 miles for the leader, 3K to go. This would be a most surprising win if he could pull this off, Steve. It looks like Jose Arada leading this small group. Serge Powell's in there, as well as Gorka Verdugo. So those are the 3 men in pursuit.
Here is the main field. Saxo Tinkoff in the yellow and blue still leading the way. Chris Horner has Robert Kieserlowski just ahead of him. Horner sitting 5th wheel from the front. Mendez our leader, and a good crowd on the final climb.
Mendez has to feed off this energy of the crowd if he wants to have any chance of winning today's stage. 12% through here.
With Saxo Tinkoff setting the pace at the front of the peloton. Time gap just inside half a minute to the leader. Mendez at this pace is going to come back. Was just under 2K left to go. On a day that looked like it was perfect for a breakaway, we saw several groups out front for most of the day, but it looks like it's all going to come back together here right near the very end. There's Thibaut Pinot. Oh, he's lost contact. Number 101 in the blue for FDJ. Pinot, 7th in the general classification, trying to hold on to his top 10, maybe even move into the top 5, but he could be slipping down the standings. This is at the front of the peloton right now. Horner in white, he is 3rd wheel. Also the battle for the final spot on the podium, too. You have Alejandro Valverde in 3rd, Joaquin Rodriguez in 4th. They're both there in that group as well.
Look at Mendez just continuing to hold on by the slimmest of margins. Arada now has been brought back. And Kieserlowski is gone from the front at this point, so it's just Horner up there on his own, sitting 3rd wheel.
Horner in the white, behind him in the green, Alejandro Valverde. Then in the red, Vincenzo Nibali, a spot or 2 behind him. Joaquin Rodriguez in the red and white of Katusha. The red kite indicating the final kilometer should be coming shortly. And they are picking up Mendez. Inside the final 1 kilometer, there are 4 turns and 1 big loop. Should be interesting here.
And there goes Roach on the throttle. He's trying to open it up. Horner right on his wheel. Then Valverde and Nibali. Let's see if Horner gasses it here. Looking around. These guys playing the tactical game.
Nicholas Roach accelerating.
Gives him a little bit of leeway. That's exactly what the Irishman needs. And it looks like Michele Scarponi coming up on his wheel. Remember, Scarponi got 2nd recently, but that team has been shut out of the top step of the podium so far in this Vuelta.
1 kilometer left to go on stage 19, up to a summit finish. And there goes Rodriguez. Parito accelerating, looking for his first stage win in his home Grand Tour this year.
Bam, bam, bam. The Spaniard has the hit, and he uses it.
Also looking to move up into the top 3 ahead of Alejandro Valverde, who is currently 3rd on the general classification.
Oh, look at the acceleration when Parito has the gas down. He is almost unstoppable.
He's missed out so far in this year's Vuelta, has not won a stage. And right now looks like he's riding away to his first stage win in the 68th edition.
He really needs this stage win, as he has been sorely underperforming in the mountaintop finishes, or the breakaways have taken all the top places. This is the type of Perito move we're used to seeing.
He was on the podium at this year's Tour de France, also now trying to ride into a podium spot at the Vuelta just a few weeks later. A win would certainly help. He would get a 10-second time bonus for finishing first as well. Scarpone, next man on the road in the pink and blue of Lampre. And still no battle between Horner and Nibali behind them. Now an Euskaltel rider attacking. Here comes Perito, Joaquim Rodriguez. Pulling into his first stage win. That's Sammy Sanchez, who lives in Oviedo. This hometown boy who lost time early on is attacking. But Rodriguez is the first man on the road, and he's going to win the stage.
Nobody can stop him when he's on the form, and he gets his first stage win at this year's Vuelta.
All right, he's got a 10-second time bonus as well. Let's see what the gap is to Valverde. All right, Horner coming up, and there's going to be a gap to Nibali. There's Vincenzo Nibali. He's going to lose the red jersey. Horner is the new leader of the Vuelta after stage 19.
Unbelievable, as Horner gets the seconds he needs. That's unofficial. We'll wait for those results to come out.
Wow. Perito wins the stage, and it looks like Horner is the leader of the Spanish Grand Tour. Classification. Chris Horner wears red once again, now with 2 days left to go. Reverses the deficit he started the day with, now leading Nibali by 3 seconds at the top of the standings.
Stage 21.
And Chris Horner is about to make history. Leading the Vuelta a España on stage 20, Horner had to survive the race's toughest climb and his toughest challenger, Vincenzo Nibali. The Astana rider, determined to make up a 3-second gap to steal the red jersey, he attacked relentlessly, time and again, to put the pressure on Horner. Through the mist and the crowd, they battled until Nibali finally had nothing left.
Oh, Nibali is cracking.
Oh, he finally blows.
It took him so long to get to this point. The heart that he has had to attack time and time again.
The rest of the way up the mountain became a stairway into cycling lore for 41-year-old Chris Horner, who was exhausted at the finish. But now he has recovered for his coronation in the capital of Madrid. It is the final day of Grand Tour racing this year. Stage 21 of the Vuelta a España, presented by your buds here on Universal Sports. And Chris Horner, set to make history, is the oldest man to ever win a Grand Tour, leading the Italian Vincenzo Nibali by 37 seconds. If you're looking for significant climbs, big mountains, you're going to have to wait for the Giro, because this is as flat is flat.
It's pretty darn flat. They got a bunch of circuits at the end, only 68 miles in length, and look for a field sprint.
And there is the man who is about to be crowned the winner in the red jersey, Chris Horner, receiving congratulations from riders around him.
Yeah, Yanni Brajkovic on his left, old teammate on the Astana squad, good buddies. The Garmin men, Tyler Farah in the middle there. Today could be a day for him to get that elusive European win that's been waiting for him for a couple of years.
Finally a real meal. Enough of those gels during the race. Well, they still haven't picked up the pace, as we should see the racing start to begin a little more in earnest once they get onto the circuits that they will encounter in the Spanish capital of Madrid. Today's race starting southwest of Madrid, going in a clockwise direction. They start in a southeasterly direction and then turn north and northwest back to Madrid. Once they come into the heart of the Spanish capital, they will see the finish line 9 different times. They're doing several circuits around the town, 5.7 kilometers per lap, but have not made it to the circuits as of yet. In the white jersey, that was Vincenzo Nibali, the man who had battled Chris Horner for so many days. He's wearing the white jersey because It's the combined classification jersey. Horner leading that competition, but I think Horner prefers red over white at this point.
Anytime you can possibly be wearing the red one, that's the one you want today, the final day of the race. And one of the things Chris talked about, each time he lost the jersey previously, when he picked it up on 2 separate occasions before getting it on the final part of the Pike race, he said he was happy that he didn't have to use his team to protect that jersey. Although he's...
And we come back to our live coverage of the final day of the season's final Grand Tour, stage 21 of the Vuelta a España, presented by Your Buds here on Universal Sports. Chris Horner in the red jersey for the 3rd different time in this race. Both he and Vincenzo Nibali losing it and getting it back a few different times, each wearing it on 3 different occasions after losing it. Nibali wore it longer than anybody else at this race, but Horner is wearing it when it counts on the final day. Steve flying alongside Todd Gogolski. 61 kilometers left to go here on stage 21 today. The bulk of that will be spent riding circuits around the capital in Madrid. And riding at the front, the team of Chris Horner, Radio Shack behind him. Some of the top riders on the general classification, including Alejandro Valverde in the green jersey, set to win the points competition after winning this Vuelta back in 2009. Came off a pretty hard Tour de France this year. Some were questioning if he had recovered sufficiently to really battle for the red jersey at the Vuelta. Was never much of a factor in the overall, but was always close, so you could never count him out. What I think he might be most disappointed in is he never could pull off a stage victory, and he tried on multiple occasions.
That's quite rare for the Spaniard with a very fast finish. And, you know, he's a guy who can even win reduced field sprints on occasion. And so in his preferred terrain, the big mountains, when he gets to the finish line with other guys, he's very good at out-sprinting them and taking stage wins. But the race just never really played out very well in that regard for the general classification men, because a lot of the summit finishes, well, either Horner was up the road winning them in the GC battle, or there was an early break that was up the road, and then the general classification men were fighting amongst each other further down in the standings, but no time bonuses and no stage places available on the podium.
Following the signs for Madrid. And all of these riders so thankful to have finally made it. And not a lot are left to make it into Madrid. We saw a high rate of attrition throughout this race. In fact, the Euskaltel squad is the only team finishing with all 9 riders. Every other team has at least lost 1, and a lot of teams have lost 4 or 5. Even going on to the Bakken Soleil squad that's only finishing with 3 riders from the 9 that started. And Chris Horner, with the defining moment of his career now, at almost 42 years of age, as you see Vincenzo Nibali riding along here. And Nibali gave Horner all he could handle yesterday. And you have to give the ultimate credit to the Italian. He didn't need to ride the way he did. He had already won the Vuelta a few years ago. He won his home Grand Tour, the Giro, earlier this year. He could have played it conservatively, but he attacked time and again. He went for it. He rode the way you always hope a rider who's in second place would ride on the final summit finish.
Yeah, he went for broke. There's no doubt about it. He just basically attacked Horner time and time again. And as a winner of this race, just a few seasons ago, back in 2010, but earlier this year, winning the Giro d'Italia, he came in as one of the big favorites of the race. And he went down swinging. And, you know, a lot of people have wondered, what if he had just sat on Horner all the way up that climb yesterday, the Angleroo, and then tried to get a time bonus at the end? How would that have played out for him? And, you know, we'll never know. It's possible that they would have gone slow enough in that situation because Horner didn't want Nibali to have an opportunity for time bonuses, that they wouldn't have caught all those guys except for one, and the time bonuses wouldn't have been available. But all he needed was 3 scant seconds. And every race, they have to figure out those tactics while they're suffering along the way.
Now the Euskaltel squad, again, the only one to finish with all 9 riders, but kind of bittersweet for them. They failed to win a stage at this year's Vuelta, which is the team's last Grand Tour before changing. They were going to go away entirely, but now Fernando Alonso, the Formula One driver, has stepped in. He's going to take over the team. It looks like they'll be known as something different than what they are right now, at least put together in a different manner. So it's really the final Grand Tour for Euskaltel as we know them now. So ending without a win in the Vuelta, but surviving to race another year. And at least I think for a lot of those riders, it means a lot more than pulling off a Grand Tour stage win here.
Well, you know, I mean, they came in with Sammy Sanchez hoping that Sanchez would be a little bit bigger factor in the race. He ends up today in 8th spot, but he's 9.5 minutes down, and there he is. I wish I knew what this...
Well, they're passing it around. Obviously, Chris Horner had his hands on it. Now Sammy Sanchez. It's some kind of a maybe Lego doll or something like that. I don't know. We're going to put our crack research team on it. We're going to find out exactly what that is and see how many riders end up getting their hands on it by the end of the stage.
Yeah, Euskaltel for them other than finishing all of their guys, which I think was a big goal for them because they knew the team was going through big changes at the end of this year. They did manage to win the team general classification, and it was pretty close. Only 1 minute and 7 seconds over Movistar. That's the first 3 guys across the line every day, and that's after 245 combined hours. So that's pretty darn close for team general classification.
Madrid in the distance, and the riders approaching the city limits here. Should be getting the bell here for the final lap.
Halfway.
Estamos a menos de 100 metros para el paso. Cabeza de carrera. Aquí viene Alessandro Menotti. Aquí viene también Javier Alamendía. ¡Vamos, chicos! Ahí estamos entrando en la última vuelta.
All right, well, there's a man in a red shirt holding up a sign that says 1 to go. So I guess in lieu of a bell, they're just showing the riders a 1 sign.
Very unusual. As usually, somebody is frantically ringing the bell with 1 remaining lap in a Vuelta which has been truly incredible, Steve.
Well, a 1 on a piece of paper. That's kind of bringing it down a little bit. Come on, where's the bell?
Maybe somebody forgot the bell.
Oh, 1 job the entire race. Well, the 2-man breakaway about to be brought back here, and Team Sky is at the front. Guess who they're riding for? Edvald Boasson-Hagen.
Boasson-Hagen is a man who's got the legs. He can certainly mix it up in a sprint. Vasil Kirienka, the man on the front, bringing back the 2 leaders for Boasson-Hagen. Kirienka, the winner on the Peña Cabarga, back in stage number 18.
So just under 6 kilometers left to go to the finish of the Vuelta. Now everybody getting serious about a stage win. It was all pageantry.
Okay, so it looks like
it was all ceremony earlier. A lot of smiles, a lot of casual riding, but now this is important for some riders, for some teams to get a stage win here. Talk about Chris Horner riding for a contract next year. How about Tyler Farah? He is still not signed for next year. He's missed out already in this Vuelta. This moment right here, these next 4 kilometers are huge for that American.
They're very big, and he has not had the race that Horner has. Look at how many Sky guys have made it up to the front. This is looking like one of the most organized lead-out trains we have seen in the entire 21 days of racing.
Now will they hold it all the way till the final few hundred meters? NetApp coming up in the white jerseys with the blue shoulder stripes. AG2R also in the mix. Tyler Farah also coming up. He's in the light blue for Garmin Sharp. A few wheels back, it looks like, along the fencing.
Yeah, Johan Van Sumeren on the front. Tireless worker on that squad. You see him doing so much good work for guys in different situations, but he's often a part of the lead-out train. NetApp probably riding for Zach Dempster in the sprint today.
So Garmin taking over here at the front. Tyler Farah has just not been in the right positions. A couple of times here at the Vuelta, he's been pretty fast, but at least one or two guys always a little faster in a better spot.
Yeah, and Tyler, right now, we have already mentioned Van Sumeren on the front for him, and he also has right in front of him Alex Rasmussen in third wheel. Tyler sitting in fourth. Now they're getting just a little bit cut off on the inside here. These hairpin corners, kind of a hassle when you're trying to get that lead out going, because if a guy gets in the inside of you, then he takes you wide and he slows you down.
Gone inside of 3 kilometers to the finish, so it is official. Chris Horner is the winner of the Vuelta a España in 2013. Now we wait and see who the stage winner is going to be. Net at the front.
Slightly off the front, as it looks like Rigoberto Urán trying to close it down for Sky there. Still third wheel. We've got the lead-out man for Tyler Farah on his Garmin Sharp team, and that's Alex Rasmussen. Farah in a very good spot right now, still has the lead-out man there.
2 kilometers left to go on stage 21 of the Vuelta a España. The NetApp rider just off the front of the field, trying to set things up for a field sprint in the Spanish capital. And we've seen some surprises in what looked to be field sprints so far in this race.
Well, and remember that Leopold Koenig won stage number 8 on the Peñas Blancas, that summit finish, and that team has been punching well above their weight the entire 21 days of this race.
Orica Green Edge moving to the front as well. Michael Matthews, their fastest sprinter. Lee Howard also pretty good in a field sprint as well. They've been trying to bring riders to the front. I just saw a few of them rotating to the very front of this peloton.
So, Steve, we've had 2 previous flat field sprints. Matthews won 1, and then Morkov won sort of a little bit of a less predictable one, and that was stages 5 and 6. Philippe Gilbert won an uphill sprint over Edvald Boassenhagen, but those are really seen in the race so far.
All right, so Orica Green Edge in the blue, yellow, and white here on the middle portion of your screen. In the dark colors with the light blue helmets and trim, that is Team Sky. Pink and blue, that is Lampre. So Orica Green Edge riding for Michael Matthews, perhaps Lee Howard. Team Sky for Edvald Boassenhagen. And now in the white kits, that is Argos Shimano. Perhaps Nikias Arndt could get in on the mix, the youngest rider in the race. And for Lampre, of course, Max Riqueze, their top sprinter.
And Riqueze, you know, in the pink, he is the guy who tends to freelance these sprints. If he has one guy, he's doing good. But usually he's without teammates at the end, and they're inside that final kilometer here on stage 21.
Straight, flat, and wide the rest of the way. The final sprint of the Vuelta a España. And no one team in firm control the way we anticipated. Orica Green Edge, Argos, Garmin, and Sky among the teams up there, and no one wants to lead it out.
Now Orica Green Edge going back to the front, but looking for Matthews in the melee. Tyler Farah sitting about third wheel with a blue helmet on.
Lotto and Belkin also trying to get into the equation here as they come down to the final few hundred meters. Argos with 2 riders at the front. Can they set up Art for a sprint win? Now Tyler Farah in the middle, in the blue jersey, trying to sprint up the gut. Nikias Art losing some speed. Here comes Michael Matthews with Tyler Farah on his wheel up the left-hand side of the road, and it's going to be Michael Matthews who gets his second stage win of the Vuelta, and he does it on the final day in Madrid as Chris Horner crosses with his arms raised as the Vuelta champion in 2013.
Matthews made that look easy as he just popped off the Argos lead out. Farah, the American, on his wheel, but he just didn't have the speed to get around him.
So Chris Horner makes it official. Yesterday it was on the Angleroo where he put his signature on this race. Today he wins it officially. The final general classification. Chris Horner wins by 37 seconds over Vincenzo Nibali, with Alejandro Valverde completing the podium 136 back. And it was yesterday where these numbers were crystallized on the Angleroo up in the fog on the toughest climb in Spain.
That first searing attack came from Vincenzo Nibali, and he put everybody on notice, especially Chris Horner in the red jersey, that he was not going down without a fight. He pulled out over a 15-second advantage on Horner, and that certainly must have made him a little bit concerned as he chased behind.
Wondering if Nibali had anything left, if it was just going to be that one surge. Well, he had plenty left. Repeated attacks of Horner all the way up the mountain.
Attack after attack. Sometimes Horner would get right on the wheel. Other times he wouldn't be able to stay on the wheel, and he would just have to dig deep within himself to close down those meters between them.
And then when things really got foggy near the top, this was the defining moment where Horner won the Vuelta.
And at this point, his director was in his ear saying, watching the race on the television in the car, saying, "You've opened the gap, keep it going, keep it going." And that's exactly what Horner did.
And then he pulled away through the crowd, through the fog. The toughest part of the climb now behind him. And he could let it wash over him and celebrate the biggest moment of his career at the finish line. Tyler Farrell won this stage back in 2010, but here 3 years later, it is the young Aussie.
One of only a handful of guys who have won 2 stages in this year's Vuelta. He won the earlier field sprint way back in stage number 5, and then picking up the final day in Madrid today.
And despite the pierced eyebrows, still has the aerodynamics to win in a sprint. Don't know how he does it.
Yeah, the man they call Bling, and it's all that jewelry. That's what gives him the nickname, but it's pretty unorthodox to have the pierced eyebrow as a professional cyclist. He's the only guy I can remember.
All right, so Michael Matthews, the stage winner, Chris Horner, the overall winner. You will see his podium as we continue live here on Universal Sports. He'll turn 42 years of age on October 23rd. Spends his time in Bend, Oregon and San Diego, California. But the 3 most memorable weeks of his career have been spent in Spain at the Vuelta, where he is the oldest Grand Tour winner in history today. The man they call Abuelito, the grandpa in Spain, pulls on the red jersey for the final time as the winner of the Spanish Grand Tour.
Incredible performance by him in his 19th professional season. He finally gets the big prize.
Turned pro back in the mid-90s when Miguel Indurain was winning the 5th of his 5 consecutive Tour de France titles. Chris Froome was 10 years of age. And so many of the riders he competed against this year were just getting started on a bike. The moment of his life, Chris Horner, the first American to ever win the Vuelta a España. Hope you've enjoyed it all along the way here on Universal Sports. And out to Todd Gagulski, I'm Steve Sanger. Thanks for joining us. One final time for the Vuelta and Chris Horner's win. It is stage number 16 at the season's final Grand Tour. One of the shorter stages of the entire race, and here is the general classification coming in. Really a 2-man race between Vincenzo Nibali and Chris Horner. And for more on this one-on-one battle, let's go to Todd Gagulski. A gorgeous day in the central Pyrenees of northern Spain, and 3 categorized climbs for the riders on this 16th day of the race.
Steve, they started out earlier today, already went over the Category 3, the long trending uphill to the Category 2, and the final climb which awaits them is the Category 1 for Miguel. It's 10 miles in length, has about a 2,000-foot vertical rise, 9.5% maximum, but it's not super steep overall, so it's going to be tough for Chris to get rid of Vincenzo on a day like today.
And we are now live looking down on the main field on a sunny, warm day in northern Spain. Quite a relief from the cold and wet weather over the course of this past weekend. And, well, these are the items at stake in today's stage 16. And I think among the items that you're taking a look at right there, the GC contenders riding towards a rest day. How much will they really want to ride today after 2 very hard days riding in the mountains on Saturday and Sunday, knowing that that rest day is coming up tomorrow?
Well, and that's a critical thing, Steve. When you got a rest day, you can ride just as flat out because you got the next day to recover. So basically what you're going to see with the GC men is if they see an opportunity to take time over Vincenzo Nibali, they're going to go for it. But today's course is not super well suited in a pure power standpoint. It's going to be a tactical event if it happens.
We have a 9-man breakaway that took quite a while to form up the road. The highest placed rider on the general classification is Chris Anker Sorensen, the Dane for the Saxo Takeoff team. He is over 20 minutes down, so no threats as you would expect in that group. The red line at the bottom of the screen showing that they are on the second of the 3 climbs, the category 2 right now. And the peloton just a minute and a half behind, but everyone really flying today. It's been a very high pace from the outset.
Everybody wanting to make the breakaway because really today looks like it has a reasonable chance of a breakaway staying away. The problem for the breakaway is it took so long to get away, they never actually got much of a time gap established. And as you can see, it's not looking so good for the breakaway right now.
Yeah, we just saw a moment ago that the gap was a minute and a half, but that's a lot less than 90 seconds with the Astana-led main field coming up from behind. Vincenzo Nibali in the red jersey. He's got 5 teammates in front of him, 1 behind, and then behind him is Chris Horner in the white jersey. He's leading the combined classification here right now at the Vuelta and sitting second in the general classification, the only man within a minute of Nibali. Well, we start this final week at the season's final Grand Tour, really a 2-man race between Nibali and Horner. So you have to look at the upcoming stages and think, all right, where might the battle really be fought? Where can Horner take back time on Nibali? Where were the tactical games really play out in the remaining stages in this final week?
And Steve, you have to look at the penultimate day on the Anglo route, which is a massive mountain and super steep, over 20%. That's a natural place. And then the Peña Cabarga as well, stage number 18, is another very steep climb to the finish line, but it's fairly short. Outside of that, you just look at things that could crop up, crosswinds, interesting tactical battles. And when I talked with Chris after the race last night, actually it was almost midnight, that he actually was just finishing up dinner. And we chatted a little bit, and he said, you know, Nibali's legs are every bit as good as his. And he either needs Nibali to have a bad day, or he needs to catch Nibali in a crosswind or something like that where the field splits in half. But he said he could also fall victim to either one of those 2 things. So these guys are very evenly matched at the top.
Looks like we have a few different groups here out on the road, judging by the pictures we're now seeing from above. We have the peloton at the bottom picking up a group of riders just in front, and then that other group that is actually up ahead on the road. So it's not just a 9-man breakaway and then the main field. Judging by these live pictures, it looks like a couple of different groups are ahead of the peloton right now, with just under 50 kilometers left to go on the stage.
Yeah, so a lot happening all of a sudden. You can see 2 more guys right now going across from the Astana-led peloton to the group right in front. And in moments like this, it's relatively easy for Vincenzo Nibali and his Astana teammates to watch guys as they go across. This is Barguil, the stage winner from a couple of days ago, I do believe, from a breakaway, the very young 21-year-old on the Argos team. But they can keep a really close eye as guys trickle off the front in a situation like this. So they know who's up the road, and they know if they have to worry about it or not. Barguil also has Cardoso with them, the Cajo Rural rider, and they have now bridged across to that group.
And Barguil, one of 8 first-time Grand Tour stage winners in this year's Vuelta. Which may sound like a lot, but it's really not a surprise, because every year the Vuelta is an opportunity for some younger riders and riders who don't always get a shot in a Grand Tour to make their mark. And now we are back up with our leaders Number 198 there in the dark with the blue trim. That is Rigoberto Urán, the Colombian for Team Sky. And Chris Anker Sorensen for Saxo Tinkoff in the blue, yellow, and black, riding in the middle of that group. As I mentioned before, the highest placed rider among the leaders in the general classification, but still over 20 minutes down. And going over the top of the Category 2 climb.
So a lot of possibilities here today. Urán, a very good man in the mountains. You have to think that he may have a shot at a stage win if that breakaway group can stay away from the field.
The actual summit at 46.8 kilometers remaining in the stage, and then they'll drop down, hit an intermediate sprint just over 30K from the finish, and then that final climb, the Formigal, is just over 15 kilometers in length going up to the summit finish of the stage. So just about the last 16K or so will be uphill here today. And a 44-second gap over the top of the second of the 3 climbs.
And the peloton right behind that other group, just over a dozen seconds or so separating them. So that second group struggling to get a little bit of an advantage over the peloton, and we'll see how the descent treats them. But the other guys have a little bit of an advantage, but you know, if it's under a minute at this point, it's going to be tough.
And these are the numbers that articulate the gaps and what the riders are facing. So no big time margins right now with 1 climb left to go. They've done the Category 3, the Cat 2, and now just the Cat 1 left to go at the finish. Still everyone just going over the top of the Category 2. Now 1 climb left to go. Just about 16 kilometers in length. The Category 1 at the finish here on stage number 16. Second rest day coming up tomorrow, and then perhaps a rare sprinter stage on Wednesday. More climbing going towards the end of this final week, and then of course the traditional final stage in the Spanish capital of Madrid that will no doubt end in a sprint next Sunday. Our leaders just over 40 kilometers now from the finish. A lot of riders, given the hard riding, the series of mountains, the tough weather, have already pulled out of this race. Almost 50. We have 4 teams that have lost 5 riders apiece. That is over half the riders on a given team, because everybody starts with 9 when a Grand Tour begins. And it's basically the equivalent of 5 teams altogether. 48 riders at the start of the day had pulled out. So you're looking at basically 5 teams worth of riders abandoning this race with still a week left to go. That's an illustration, and a perfect one, of just how hard this race has been.
And Steve, it's not just been all the mountains, but certainly that's been a big component of it. But it's also been some of the nasty weather they had over the weekend, especially on Saturday's stage number 14. That particular day was brutally cold. It was really long,
I wasn't paying attention,
and
so
they were also descending
I don't know
in those
if
cold
I
temperatures in the rain,
passed
and
by
it just
myself or
freezes
not.
you on the bike. All right, Will here really putting the pressure on that chasing group that's trying to make it up to the lead group of 9. He's already tasted victory in this Vuelta, and I think it was pretty sweet for him. He wants a little bit more.
As I pointed out, one of 8 first-time Grand Tour stage winners that we have had at the Vuelta so far this year. Now, when you see riders pull out of a race like this, it's always interesting, because when you look at other sports, athletes don't always have those options. If a football player wants to quit a game in the second quarter, his coach is going to say, no, you get back in there and you play. Same with basketball, hockey, baseball. But in cycling, it seems like the athletes themselves have more control and more power over the situation. Why is that?
That's a tough one to answer why that is, but I guess it's really because the rider knows about how bad their body feels and how much they're suffering. And I think with a coach in a typical team sport, they can see the guy out there and they can see that he's floundering. They can see that he's not making his passes, he's not hitting his shots, he's not making it happen. But in a bike race, if you're just empty, you're empty. And now, there are some exceptions to those particular moments, and there used to be a race before the wall came down in the Eastern Bloc. It went through East Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia, called the Peace Race, and it's come back, but it's not as big a race on the calendar anymore. And a couple of years before I raced that race, Steve, one of the Russian guys was in the gutter in a crosswind and ran into one of these guardrails and broke, it was his foot or his lower leg or something. His coaches, because they weren't sure, put him back on his bike and said, you're only 10K from the finish line. You got to finish because we need you tomorrow, and we want to make sure before we let you quit today that you're not able to. So he rode 6 miles basically with a broken bone in his lower leg. And
what a shock the Russians would take a hardline stance like that.
Well, and the thing is, Steve, that was the race before the wall came down. Those guys weren't racing in the rest of Europe, so that was their Tour de France, and it meant everything to that Russian coach, and the rider had to suffer through it. And they said, oh yeah, look at that, you got a broken leg, I guess you don't have to ride tomorrow.
Now left to go on stage 16 today. And if you have questions for Gogo, you can tweet them here throughout the Vuelta telecast. And the most recent one coming in wants to know, Paul that is, how long do most professionals try to keep in the big rig when climbing?
Well, Paul, that's pretty easy. Just long enough to stay with Steve Schlanger, and he's putting the hammer down on one of those big climbs.
And I'm just drilling it, you mean? Yeah.
When you're putting everybody in the hurt locker. But in all reality, what I think is the most efficient for most guys at the professional level that have a lot of efficiency and higher leg speeds is to be in the easiest gear you can be in while maintaining contact with the guys that matter. So when I was racing, and still when I go out and ride with a lot of guys, if I'm on a big mountain, I want to be spinning up the climb. And if Schlanger's up there on the front just drilling it, well, if I can be spinning in easier gear, I'll get out of my big chain ring. But if I need to stay in that bigger gear to stay with them, then I will. And that tends to be my approach to climbs, and that's what I tell young riders when they're getting into the sport of bike racing.
Because you know, I'm in the big ring going over Alpe d'Huez, Mont Ventoux. I am not backing down.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way you roll, Schlanger.
All right, so for more Twitter questions, you can do it at BeachyGogo, hashtag La Vuelta, in this final week of the Vuelta a España. Everyone on the descent of the Category 2 climb headed towards the final climb. This was just moments ago. Watch out along the guardrail.
Well, Gregory Ross looking back for his team car, but up in front, the Lampre rider stopping on the side of the road, and pow! Luckily, it was a low-speed crash, but Ross was critical 2 days ago in the wet when Chris Horner actually got split off on a descent, and Ross went to the front for like 5 miles and just closed down the gap for Chris. And Chris was really very happy about that. He was telling me that last night as well.
Riders coming through the town of Gavin with just about 36 kilometers left to go. They are 4K away from the second of the 2 intermediate sprints on today's stage.
Well, this is the 2 front groups coming together. The man right at the back of the group in front of the motorcycle up there is Warren Barguil, who went across from the second group. He was absolutely bombing this descent, and the other 3 men here getting across as well.
Now, a lot of these riders know that the general classification teams are more than likely going to let them go. There's not going to be a big battle behind them for the stage win, given everything that's happened. So they're all sensing an opportunity to win a stage.
You ever wonder how you get these great images? Well, it's the man on the back of the motorcycle standing up with the camera. They do that on the descents as well sometimes, but sometimes they're going so fast downhill they have to sit down for the center of gravity on the motorcycle.
Can't imagine there's a more difficult sport to cover for television than professional cycling at this level.
It is quite tricky, there's no doubt. There's so much going on out there on the roads. and all the organization that it takes to close down these towns and keep people and cars and people with their dogs and everybody out of the way. And sometimes it doesn't go right. Sometimes somebody's dog does get off the leash or out of their yard and into the bunch, and it can cause big crashes.
Now riders still off the front, in pursuit, giving chase. A lot of activity off the front of the peloton with the two groups, and especially the breakaway of 9 riders that's been at the front. But everybody wants to make it to the front, catch the riders who are at the very head of the stage right now, and put themselves in position to go for a stage win as these riders hit that intermediate sprint point I just mentioned a moment ago.
Steve, there are a lot of possibilities. Gusev, the Katusha rider, Sorensen, and the other Sorensen on the Saxo team. That's Nikki Sorensen going across. Today is one of those days where a lot of guys really thought there was a chance if they made the break that they would stay away, because the finishing climb, though it's long, is not super steep, and maybe the general classification guys will just be eyeing each other and not ramp it up fast enough to catch the breakaway.
Well, it's a very interesting dynamic right now because you have a lot of riders here in this move that is up the road. They just don't have a lot of time. And when you have a long climb at the finish, you're going to have that natural process of attrition that's going to bring a lot of these riders back and carry a lot of the general classification riders forward. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. Are some of these riders going to launch an attack and maybe 3 or 4 go up the road together? There's just a lot of possibilities now for the way the remainder of the stage could unfold.
Yeah, and that group looks like it's about 20 guys at this point. So it is definitely one of those days where you roll the dice and just see how it plays out at the end of the day.
Back here at the front of the general classification group, going through the intermediate sprint, 122 down, led by Astana.
So the lead group has picked up a little bit of time. They were down to only 37 seconds advantage over the peloton not long ago. If that keeps up for very long, if Astana is comfortable, the team in the blue, the team of the overall leader, Vincenzo Nibali, if they are happy with that break, it may succeed.
Some riders scattered about right now in that peloton as they look up the long road ahead to see another big group now at the front of the stage. Margin now swelling to our leaders, going up close to 3 minutes with 26.5 kilometers remaining.
Amassed around him, and then it's all the Astana guys on the front. They are certainly content to let that breakaway go today.
Thinking about how Astana has all the riders still in this race, and of course Vincenzo Nibali is leading the overall race for Astana. Nibali was part of the Liquigas Cannondale team that had that incredible streak of so many Grand Tours in a row where they wouldn't lose a single rider. Every single guy was finishing every single Grand Tour.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible as we see so much attrition in these Grand Tours. And it makes sense. I mean, you got 3 weeks of racing over 23 calendar days, so there's always 2 rest days thrown in there. But guys, inevitably, they end up sick, they crash out, or they just get so depleted they can't go any further, and they have to drop out of the race. And so it's not unheard of to see almost every team finish some riders down in every Grand Tour.
So Astana with most of their riders at the front of the field right now with 25.5 kilometers left to go. So just inside of 10K away from the start of the final climb.
About him already winning stage 13 from a breakaway previously.
And each of the last 2 days we have had a first-time Grand Tour stage winner who was out front by himself for a long time, gaining a lot of time over anybody chasing from behind. Rato 2 days ago, Genier yesterday, had several minutes on everybody else, and coming from a breakaway but riding solo for the last hour or so of the race. But today a big group, and doesn't look like we're going to get that solo rider getting that substantial amount of time here today in the way we saw over the weekend.
This one's certainly could come down to seconds at the finish line. And that group is kind of splitting up. It's kind of coming back together. Some guys along for the ride, just sitting on the back, playing the tactical game that way, thinking if they can save some energy now, then they'll be good later on. But there could be a split in front of them in the group, and then they may miss that split as one of the BMC men, it looks like, heading out of the front of that breakaway group.
Fabian Cancellara, number 181 at the back of the peloton. Been one of the top support riders for Chris Horner in the hills, and also won the time trial on stage 11 in dominating fashion.
You've got to look for Cancellara at the Worlds as well to be a hugely marked man. I think in the road race, he's going to be so marked it may ruin his chances, but he may be on some of the best road form of his career right now.
Euskaltel at the front of the field. Sammy Sanchez is their highest placed general classification rider. Yesterday moving up into the top 10. Currently sitting 9th at 7:46 behind Nibali. Sanchez looks like second wheel there from the front, so perhaps just trying to protect his spot, maybe even move up further in the general classification.
And they're one of those teams that has all 9 members remaining. The other one is Astana. And interestingly, they're the top 2 teams in the team general classification, which is the first 3 guys that cross your line, the finish line every day. Astana leads that by 3:53 over Euskaltel. It's a little curious to me to see all the Euskaltel guys on the front right now. They're not going to bring back the breakaway. And I'm wondering if there's a Team GC play-in. Maybe Movistar has a bunch of guys in this break, and they're the 3rd place team on Team GC, and maybe that's what they're riding for right now, is to try and keep that gap small.
Yeah, you never know. There's so many possibilities.
You get a bit of a lead now.
The Team GC, it could be just for Sanchez. It could be other guys just trying to move around in the general classification or race for a separate competition.
Really,
you always look at points and King of the Mountains, the combination jersey. There's so many other subcategories beyond the overall general classification that teams have their eyes on, and on any given day they could be riding for that as opposed to just the overall. Well, our leaders with a margin of just over 3 minutes and just about to start that last climb. Officially, it begins at 15.8 kilometers remaining on the stage.
That was good.
So if you do want to attack, that is a likely point late in the climb. With 15 kilometers left to go now, Barguil pulls off the front. This is Iran for Team Sky now at the head of affairs.
Chiruka there for Caja Rural. And that is
Jose Herrera there for Movistar as well.
So there is at least one Movistar man up the road. No Euskaltel men up the road right now. Thinking about that Team GC issue potentially.
And we have a rider accelerating here. He's going to go to the front and stretch things out a little for the group.
Yeah, trying to make it up there. Dominique Nares in this front group is the BMC man in the red and black.
Looks like there's a good chance of this group coming back together the way things are developing here.
So that's Arata in the blue for Movistar, Barguil in the white for Argos. And we do have a Euskaltel rider up there as well. So now it makes absolutely no sense to me why the Euskaltel men are on the front of the peloton.
Could it still be the general classification?
I guess it's got to be.
In some fashion for Sammy Sanchez?
Yeah, they just got to be thinking maybe he can pop off late in the race today and pick up a handful of seconds and have an impact on the general classification. You talked about Sanchez coming in 7:46 down in 9th place, but it's Leopold Koenig in 8th at 6:18. That's almost a minute and a half in front of him in the GC. But you know, you pick up a little time here, a little there, and maybe by the end of this week, he moves up into the top 5. Maybe that's what he's got his designs on.
And Euskaltel is still thinking about the team Toronto coming in to take over the team, and yet to be seen how he'll change things or what they'll be referred to as going forward. But Euskaltel, the way we have known them over the years, is now going to be altered in somewhat. So maybe this would be a good way to go out in their final grand tour to win the team competition. As you see the critical numbers here on the final clock. So no one really getting away from the big group at the front. We've seen some accelerations, but nothing that's looked close to becoming permanent. 2K into the climb, back at the front of the field. Euskaltel in the orange and black still leading the way. We are just under 14 kilometers left to go on stage 16 of the Vuelta a España, presented by Earbuds here on Universal Sports. A big leading group has just under 3 minutes on the main field on one of the shorter stages in this year's race. This is the final of 3 consecutive stages in the Pyrenees in northern Spain. Steve Schlanger with Todd Gugulski. Gorgeous day, sunny and warm after cold and rainy weather this weekend. Forced a lot of riders to drop out. Maybe rethinking things now, judging by the scenery they are enjoying today on stage 16, just ahead of the race's second rest day coming up tomorrow. We had a few different groups on the road earlier in the race as the breakaway tried to get settled. Took a long time today, and finally 2 groups came together, formed a large group at the front. And now this is the head of the peloton, led by Euskaltel in the orange and black, just going inside the 15K to go banner on the stage.
Up here in that large breakaway group, it's Juan Manuel Garate, the Spaniard on the Belkin squad, who's trying to mix things up a little bit. The Frenchman in the white who just swung off of the chase, Warren Barguil, who won stage 13 from a breakaway earlier in this race. But you can see how many guys are back there trying to claw their way back up to the wheel of the few men in front of them.
Now the Belkin team is one of the 4 that I mentioned earlier that has lost 5 riders throughout this race. They lost Theo Boss, Graham Brown, Steph Clement, Luis Leon Sanchez, and Laurent Tandam along the way. So they've lost over half the riders they started with. So trying to salvage something in Juan Manuel Garate now at the front of the stage with just about a dozen kilometers left to go uphill to the finish.
And Steve, of course, this large group of riders has nobody who's a threat in the general classification battle of this Vuelta. So they are content to fight it out for the stage win, as Mikel Charel, the 3rd man up here, and he is number 15 on the left, just getting back on the wheel of Garate. This breakaway group with no threat from the GC has a very good chance of succeeding for the stage win.
Barguil, Charel, and Garate. Garate at the front in the green and dark colors for Belkin. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Juan Manuel Garate the rider who on Saturday during the cold and rain got into the team car and warmed up for a little while before continuing in the race?
I actually think it was him, as he just put the heater on full blast and said, look, I have 2 options. I can lose 10 minutes sitting in the car, or I can quit the race. Well, let me think about that for about 10 minutes. Okay, I guess I'll get back on my bike.
So during the way he's riding today, maybe that little lunch break in the team car to warm up was a smart move. Inside of 11K now to the finish of stage 16.
That's what's so critical about these bike racers, is that they never give up, because yeah, there are only a few guys in the hunt for the general classification, but anybody could pick up a stage win from a breakaway on a day like today. And so if you feel horrible one day, you just can't drop out, and you may still get another chance.
And not as shocking as you may think, because considering what Belkin had been through, again, losing 5 riders already, so they weren't going to do much in the race. There was nobody left for the general classification, nobody left for the sprints. So maybe just winning a stage in the final week was the only goal they had left. So Garate says, hey, I can lose time in the general classification, no big deal. I'll take care of my body now and be fresh later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the name of the game. You gotta get whatever you can get out of these races, and you just fight to the next day, and you say, let's see if I can get in the break, and the entire team gets taxed, or I should say tasked, with making the breakaway, and they all follow the attacks, and they all go on the attack, and eventually one of those moves sticks, and if you got your guy in there, well, that's the first part of your job accomplished.
10 kilometers left to go. Euskaltel at the front of the main field. They have it lined up and are forcing the pace.
Yeah, you can see Chris Horner, well, we just lost him there, but he's about 9-10 guys back, and he's just right behind that strung out single file pace being led by Euskaltel.
This is back to the large leading group at the front.
So the youthful exuberance of Warren Barguil after winning a stage from a breakaway back a few days ago, stage number 13. I wonder if he's going to do too much work in that breakaway group. He looks like he has great legs, but he may blow himself up in the process of trying to get away from everybody else and thin it down.
And the rider from Cofidis is coming back from the breakaway. Well, the way that Euskaltel has been riding now for the last several kilometers, at first it looked like maybe it was for the team competition or maybe just a GC placing for somebody like Sammy Sanchez, but the way they've been riding, you almost have to think that they're trying to bring everything back so they can get a stage win.
It does seem that way to me, as they're going huge right now. So 2:39 at the 11K to go banner. So that's just under 7 miles from the finish of the bike race.
It's still a big group to try and bring back here.
Well, the youthful exuberance continues, and this time with nobody on his wheel, this is what he needs. Sitting on the front, pulling the other guys that don't want to work with him is probably not going to net him a stage win, but this type of a move, this guy can go uphill.
Barguil making his move right here. Turned around, said, you know what? This is not a good deal. All you guys sitting on my wheel, so I'll see you later. Catch me if you can.
Yeah, and if they look around at each other in that giant group and everybody says, no, I'm not going to chase, you chase. No, I'm not going to chase, you chase. Well, the man who won the Tour de l'Avenir last year, he also won the Mountains and the Points classification, and that's the race for the young guys, also known as the Race of the Future. He could pick up his second stage win in this year's Vuelta at only 21 years of age.
And among that large leading group, he was riding at the front longer than anybody else. It wasn't one of those big groups we typically see where everybody takes even pulls at the front. They all work in concert with one another. Barguil was left to do so much of that pacemaking, so this is a smart move to take off and see what he can do on his own. All right, so they went through that flat and downhill section early in the climb, now starting to go steadily uphill.
What's incredible about this guy is he's a first-year professional, Steve. To get the win in stage 13, he was ecstatic. He was overcome with joy. Now he's got that confidence from that, and he's gone on the attack again from that breakaway group. And now he can start to try and think about it and think, I've already done this once. Can I do this again? He will be absolutely beside himself if he can win a second stage.
And now Astana has put a man back on the front ahead of Euskaltel. They are 2:46 behind Barguil at this point. Climb, but back here in the general classification, with the rest day on tap tomorrow, does it make it worthwhile to even try something today, or do you just save it for the big climbs coming up later this week?
Well, have a look at the speed of the peloton, and it is actually on right now in the peloton. The peloton is blowing apart, so definitely, if you have a shot, go for it. Nibali sitting third wheel in the red jersey, overall leader. Valverde fourth wheel in the green as the points leader. Right behind Valverde in the white jersey, Chris Horner out of the saddle right now. They all have to keep looking at each other, because if you get an opportunity, man, you have to take it.
So Katusha at the front of this group too. Their goal now is to try to move Joaquim Rodriguez onto the podium. He's fourth in the overall standings at 257 behind Nibali, but he's chasing Alejandro Valverde, who is third on the GC at 142 back.
Oh, this is white hot. I mean, these guys are absolutely storming, and it looks like Moreno now just pulling
Here goes
off
Valverde.
the front. Here he goes.
Alejandro Valverde launching the move. Nibali looks at Horner.
Horner needs to just sit on Nibali. Horner has to not do any work here. He has to make Nibali do the work, put him into trouble.
Horner has a teammate in Kieselowski, and Nibali also has a teammate for Astana there as well, as Valverde gets a small gap.
He's 1 minute, 42 seconds down in third place, and it looks like he just sat up. I mean, that's it. He just pulled the plug.
Now, he may be trying to play a little defense for his podium spot right now. Again, sitting in third with Rodriguez behind him in fourth, and Katusha was setting a pretty good tempo ahead of him a moment ago.
And I think that Valverde, he looked back, he realized he wasn't getting much of an advantage. It's a headwind, and he said, maybe this isn't going to work. And he just pulled the plug on his own. I don't think his director would have told him to sit up at that point, because the director can't feel his legs, right?
And it's not like he's going to win the stage. They're not going to catch Barguil from this point.
Now remember, everybody has the rest day to look forward to tomorrow, so it's a good day to go for shots, and that looks like Nicholas Roach taking another shot just like yesterday.
Roach trying to move up into the top 5, currently 6th on the general classification, 349 down, but he's just 6 seconds from a top 5 spot.
And they immediately neutralized him with Katusha, and it looks like Rodriguez on the second wheel now. Rodriguez opens it up.
Burrito was attacking yesterday, didn't go anywhere. Now Chris Horner just ahead of Nibali, putting in a little bit of an acceleration, and he's got a small gap on Nibali.
Well, Rodriguez loves to accelerate in a very punchy fashion. Horner, a little separation, and there's no Nibali with Horner. Horner needs to just throttle him.
But he's looking around. He's looking around at 2K.
Now he's going. Now Horner's starting to pick it up, but it's Nibali closing it down in the red jersey.
Yeah, here comes Vincenzo Nibali now, working his way back to Chris Horner with Valverde on Nibali's wheel. As we swing back to the very front of the race, haven't seen this guy in the last several minutes.
Up, and Barguil just blew up, but Horner now continuing to keep it going here.
He's still got the gap on Nibali. There's Aran. Rigoberto Aran passing Warren Barguil as they hit the 1K to go mark.
Aran could salvage something for the Sky team here. Aran with a lot more experience than Barguil in the professional ranks. Realize that Barguil is a first-year pro.
At a thoroughbred pace, it seems like, in the final half mile of the race. Side by side. And then behind them, Burrito Rodriguez with his teammate, Vladimir Gusev. So Rodriguez sitting right behind Gusev, and they have a gap on the other general classification riders led by Horner here. Where's Nibali?
Oh, this is huge right now as Horner has that gap. He needs 50 seconds to move back into the overall lead. Not much time to do it today, but he might be getting some of it.
So much for a nondescript day before a rest day. This is Nibali losing time to Horner, sitting behind Valverde.
And Thibaut Pinot there, and then it's Valverde, then it's now in the orange is Sammy Sanchez. Nibali in.
There goes Valverde. Valverde launches a move.
You gotta go when you have the race leader in trouble.
It looks like Burrito Rodriguez here. Now it looks like the time bonuses will be eaten up ahead of these riders on the road. Chris Horner in the middle of the screen in the white. Behind Rodriguez, who was at the bottom of the screen. This is the race leader, Vincenzo Nibali. He is losing time. These are our two leaders on the stage. Aran in the dark colors, Barguil in the white, coming up to the finish, waiting to see who's going to get the stage win between these two.
And Barguil refusing to pull. He says, no, you're in the front.
Oh,
and here comes Nares right on the wheel with Husarski. Husarski's got a good finish as well. Don't count him out.
Aran looks over his shoulder just the way he did in the Olympic road race in London last year. It cost him a gold medal. Now he's trying to preserve a stage win here at the Vuelta. Looks like it could be a four-man race for the victory today with 200 meters to go.
And Aran starting to ramp of age, showing the poise of a seasoned veteran, not taking a pole and getting the win. But here's Horner right back here.
He is a little ways behind this man, Joaquim Rodriguez. Again, Joaquim Rodriguez looking to move up into the top 3, currently 4th in the general classification.
This is a big battle, and look at Nibali, all kinds of guys up the road from the race leader.
That's Leopold Koenig coming up behind him. Now, other riders crossing over here, part of the early breakaway. Here's Torino Rodriguez.
And Rodriguez needs a bit of time to move up onto the podium. He's 257 down. Valverde is 142 down.
But he does have a gap on Valverde, who's behind him on the road. But this is the big story here. Vincenzo Nibali, the race leader, starting the day 50 seconds ahead of Chris Horner, who's in the white jersey here. But Horner has a big gap on Nibali. He's got Valverde right behind him, and then Thibaut Pinot in the blue.
So it is true that Valverde made it across from the Nibali group up to the Horner-led group. And now he's just sitting on the wheel, and he's probably going to jump Chris, but Chris needs to bury the throttle to get back as much time as he possibly can on Vincenzo Nibali.
All right, here's Nibali at 300 meters to go with Igor Anton in the orange and black for Euskaltel. Let's see where the Horner-Valverde group is. Here's Rodriguez coming across the finish line. There's Valverde, who pulled ahead of Pinot and Horner. Chris Horner crosses the line. And 146 behind the stage winner. Now let's see where Nibali comes across. He's got 100 meters left to the line.
It's a nice little chunk that he picked up, no doubt.
Already 15 seconds that Horner has taken back. Over 20 seconds, Horner has pulled back on Nibali. 22 seconds officially. Horner takes back on the race leader Vincenzo Nibali with the summit finish on stage 16 at the Vuelta. We come back to our coverage of stage 16 at the Vuelta a España. And here is the new general classification. Chris Horner now within half a minute of Vincenzo Nibali at the top of the standings. Also some movement behind them with Alejandro Valverde and Joaquim Rodriguez on the move there late in the stage. And Rodriguez actually picks up a few seconds on Valverde as they race for that final podium spot. Valverde, the first to accelerate from the group of GC riders on the last climb.
This really got things ramped up as Valverde sat up, but then he went again, and all the men started to crumble up the road. Also was Joaquim Rodriguez, who had attacked after Valverde went, and it was when Chris Horner went after him that that gap really opened up.
So this is where Nibali for a moment looked like he was going to bring it back on Horner, but then Horner opened up a larger margin.
Horner just stayed out of the saddle and just kept drilling it as Rodriguez came across. Then Valverde, who had gotten up to the Chris Horner group and jumped him at the end, but the clock stopped there for Horner, and it was a long time before Nibali got to the finish line.
It would be 22 seconds overall between Horner and Nibali at the finish today, reducing his deficit from 50 seconds to 28.
Stage 17.
Well, here we go. The final 5 days of the season's final Grand Tour, and here is where we stand. Vincenzo Nibali is still the leader by now. Just under half a minute is his margin over the American Chris Horner at 28 seconds. So much developed a couple of days ago. For more, let's go to GoGo Cycle Center, outfitted by Adrenaline. 9 kilometers to Burgos with 2 Category 3 climbs there in the second half of the race.
And it is about 117 miles today. There's that little bump inside the final 10K, but when you only have a 2-man break, it certainly looks like a day for the sprinters.
Years ago.
And that 2-man break is on the left-hand side of the screen, now full screen. As we pick up the live action with just under 80 kilometers left to go, they have a lead of 4 minutes, which is just under half of their largest margin, which was over 8 minutes earlier in the stage. The Aussie Adam Hansen is the rider right here for Lotto Belisol, and Javier Aramendia in the green green and white. Just behind him is the Spaniard for the Caja Rural team. Two-man breakaway that the general classification riders were content to let go. They are well down in the general classification. Hansen here, almost 2 hours back of our leader, Vincenzo Nibali.
Very tough for two guys. Javier Armendia, you're seeing 3 hours 16 minutes down on the general classification, but he's featured in multiple breaks. But on a day like this that everybody thinks the sprinters really want to take advantage of an opportunity, it's so hard if you only have a two-man break for them to stay away. But it's always time to eat.
A little pizza pocket or something that he shoves in the mouth as we take you through what is at stake here in this stage number 17. You have the two category 3 climbs, and you have the notion of a sprint stage versus a breakaway, potentially stealing the opportunity from the sprinters. Now, Lampre is the team riding at the front of the main field. They're the team in the pink and blue. Also the team of sprinter Max Marchese, who has already proven himself to be one of the fastest sprinters in the field so far.
Yeah, a couple of second place finishes in the race, and he continues to, well, let's just say hold out hopes. If you're a sprinter, you have to believe in your ability. And of course, his team has to believe in that ability as well.
The most recent inquiry coming from Sandra, asking Gogo if the ride into Madrid on the final day is like the tour into Paris on the Champs-Élysées. Is it just ceremony for the general classification? I could even answer that one.
Would you want to answer it?
I would say absolutely. It's the same thing.
I'm going to take a slightly different take, and we can see right now, I just want to point out this crosswind has made a little bit of a difference here over the top of that climb, but it's somewhat similar to the Tour, but I think they get down to racing a little bit earlier in the Vuelta than they do in the Tour, whereas the Tour is ceremonial for a greater part of the stage. But yes, it's a flat day, so the guys know that they can't make any general classification differences, but they have the next 3 days with summit finishes to get all the business done.
Well, something to consider in this year's Vuelta is the fact that the top two, Nibali and Horner, are separated by under half a minute. So if that gap gets even closer, we may actually see some racing on the final day. It typically doesn't happen just because the time gaps are significant enough that guys just use it as that coronation type of a stage, and it's essentially a parade. But if the time gaps are small, you do see some racing.
Yeah, and there's no reason that you wouldn't. There are also two intermediate sprints on the final day, Steve, and they have a few seconds attached to each one of those. So if it's within an intermediate sprint or two, then you're really going to see some action. But we're seeing some action here right now because of the crosswind. And this is what the general classification men needed to be worried about. You saw the green jersey of Valverde there, but you need to keep a close eye out and see if Horner and Nibali are also in that front split.
And to ask Gogo a question throughout the Vuelta a España, just go to Twitter. It's @BGGogo, #LaVuelta. So Lampre at the front, Orica Green Edge there, and then Movisto. These groups now that were split on the road by a few seconds, it looks like are coming back together. But this was the most dangerous aspect of this stage. The winds coming from various directions, headwind, crosswind, tailwind should be coming up later on, but something you always have to keep a watchful eye for. And now on the left-hand side of the road, almost single file here at the back because of those winds. Looks like a sprinter stage on paper, but you have a couple of climbs, you have some undulations late, you have wind, you never know what might happen, and we've seen more than one textbook sprinter stage develop into something entirely different throughout this race.
And that was Simons, who just got brought back, who was off the front and was third over the last mountain, but we still up to our two men off the front. So now that means the next climb of the day, the guy who's third across can get some points, and we may see another battle between Rato and Ade for that final point.
Barguil, the young Frenchman of the Argos team, who won stage number 17 in dramatic fashion, outsprinting Rigoberto Urán. at the very end. He's won 2 stages in this Vuelta, his first 2 Grand Tour stage victories, and the young Frenchman, believe it or not, has as many wins as Spain does in their home Grand Tour. The only Spanish victories are Daniel Moreno's 2 stage wins. That's incredible.
It really is incredible. I mean, sometimes you can never predict what's going to happen in a bike race, and some days, well, they're somewhat predictable, but these Grand Tours, the way these tea leaves, as you like to refer to them, get played out, it can be really challenging to figure out how it's going to happen.
And the wind's still blowing, not all that briskly at the moment for our 2 leaders on this Category 3 climb, as the gap for the first time since we've seen them has come down under 3 minutes. And just about 2.5 kilometers left to go uphill. Now, so many elements in play for the general classification. The experience of Nibali finishing off a Grand Tour, having had to fight for it all the way to the end. Chris Horner, just the experience of being a veteran bike racer, having the freshness of not forcing a peak earlier in the season the way Nibali did. And Horner just having that fitness right now in the big mountains that nobody else seems to have. There's other guys who are riding pretty well, but nobody is climbing as well as Chris Horner. So you have a lot of these components that are going to all be huge factors in the final 5 days of racing here. And it's just basically all going to come down to who has it when it matters most in the upper reaches of the decisive climbs. And we should see that tomorrow and on Saturday. All right, 2 leaders leading by just under 3 minutes, coming up towards the top of the Category 3 climb. Well, the 11th day overall for Vincenzo Nibali in the red jersey as the leader of the Vuelta. Now on stage number 17, trying to recover from the exertions of those 3 consecutive summit finishes in the Pyrenees, coming off the rest day yesterday where he slept in till almost noon. And now trying to recover for 2 more big mountain days coming up tomorrow and on Saturday, stage number 20. As they hit the 4-hour mark today on stage 17, 2-man breakaway, 2-minute lead, 38.5 kilometers left to go. But boy, what a battle it's been between Nibali and Horner. Each has worn the red jersey twice, lost it, gotten it back. You don't often see an overall race lead at a Grand Tour like that, going back and forth that much, especially early in a race. But Nibali has surrendered it, gotten it back, and now he's enjoyed the longest consecutive spell that he's had the entire race, and he's hoping to hang on all the way to Madrid.
It certainly has been a big battle, Steve. And, you know, one of the things that you often don't see is you don't see the guy who's in the overall lead having not won a stage. And that's the case with Nibali right now. His Astana team won the opening team time trial by a handful of seconds over Radio Shack and Chris Horner's team. But since then, Horner's taken a couple of stage wins, and each time it's put him in the jersey, but then he's gone on to lose it the very next day, whereas Nibali has just been consistently at the top of the standings on each individual stage, and that's been the key to being in the jersey at this point.
Lampre, the team in the pink and blue, riding at the front of the main field here to keep the breakaway in check. There's the King of the Mountains leader, Nicolas Ede, now at the back of the field after getting the 3rd slot in terms of points available over the final categorized summit today. But Lampre at the front of this group, riding for sprinter Max Riqueze here today. And that second climb, Hansen, Armandia, and Ede were the first 3 over, the only 3 getting any points. The way it stands right now in the general classification, it's all coming down to what happened on the time trial on stage number 11. Chris Horner lost 1.5 minutes to Nibali there. Had he lost just about a minute, maybe a little less, he'd be in the red jersey right now.
There's no doubt, and it's one of those weird things that it's an intangible to calculate. When I was talking with Chris before the time trial, he told me, well, you know, he didn't really care if he lost the jersey as long as he was close, that he could get it back in the mountains because he was feeling so good. But when he came out of that time trial 50 seconds down, that was on the sort of the far end of where he thought he was going to be. He thought he would probably be 30 seconds to 60 seconds off the lead. And when I spoke with his director after that, he said, well, we wish that Chris had been 15 seconds out of the jersey, not 50. So, you know, you have to take what you can get there, and certainly they haven't had to defend, which keeps the guys fresher, but it's a lot of time to make up.
And we've discussed throughout this race how him being fresh and not having raced that much because of the knee injury might help him long term, but that's also potentially where his biggest liability came in, not having the miles under his belt on the TT bike.
Yeah, he hadn't been on his time trial bike at all. And that was a question I made sure to ask him. And he just said, look, man, you know, I spent the whole summer going to different specialists trying to figure out what was wrong with my knee and how to get over it. And he couldn't ride his bike. So when he finally was able to get back on his bike, he did, you know, and I'm summarizing here, 2 weeks riding around my neighborhood, just getting used to riding again. 2 weeks of endurance riding, and 1 really long, hard week before the Tour of Utah. Then he took a few days off, raced Utah, won a stage, got 2nd overall, and then he continued with a few hard days after taking 1 day off after Utah, went to Spain, took a few days off, started the race. So he felt like he would benefit more by just training on his road bike than really spending the focused time on the time trial bike. And in the end, there's no way to know, you know.
Which makes sense because your climbing comes around first, and that's been evidenced by how good Horner has been climbing at the Vuelta, but you compromise your time trialing when you're not on your TT bike as much, and in the end, that 1 day could be the difference in the red jersey for this race.
It certainly could, and no matter what happens in this race, if Chris Horner loses it, if he loses it by anything less than 50 seconds, everybody's going to say that was the deciding factor. And to a point, it's somewhat true. But if he loses the race by 28 seconds, where he is now, let's say he gets the same time as Vincenzo on every one of the next stages, you still can't guarantee that the time trial was the exact deciding factor, but it was certainly a big part in it.
Because things could have gone a different way. Maybe Nibali then attacks more in the hills if he needs time earlier in the race. So you don't know how the dynamics would have played out if the time trial would have gone differently.
That's right. But there's no doubt that the time trial was a tough day for Chris. There he is, getting a little food in his system right now.
In the white jersey.
There he is, right there. And who does he have in front of him? A bunch of his Radio Shack teammates.
Our 2 leaders had a gap of over 8 minutes at 1 point and now down under 2 minutes. As we move back to Twitter for more questions. Go, fielding them left and right here today. And Andrew asking if a breakaway crash within 3 kilometers of the finish happens and the peloton catches them, do they still get the time gap they had before the crash?
So if you got 3 guys that come in, let's say they all wipe out with 1K to go on some hairy corner, and they get caught, well, then they don't get a gap, because the way the rule works is if you have a mechanical or a crash in the final 3K, you get the time of the group you were with when they finish. Well, if the whole breakaway crashes out, there's no group that finishes up ahead from that breakaway. And look at these crosswind battles here. Speaking of crashing, this is where things get really hairy.
A chance to split up the field, and look at all the groups forming now.
Okay,
as the gap to our 2 leaders comes down to just over a minute.
I can see Valverde right there in the green. I can see the red jersey right back there, his white helmet. And Horner was in there as well.
So our top 3 on the general classification are there. What could make these crosswinds interesting is what sprinters get dropped along the way, and these battles rage on through the remainder of the stage, because we don't have all of the true sprinters still left in this race to begin with. Their teams don't have the full complement of 9 riders, so what could be a reduced field of sprinters may come apart even more here the rest of the way.
And these crosswinds, man, they take their toll so fast. Nicholas Aday in the King of the Mountains jersey. There's Horner, second wheel. And it's Cancellara right on the front. Cancellara is the man in these kind of conditions. In fact, Horner's saying he hopes there's crosswinds because he's got the TGV Express in the name of Fabian Cancellara to shepherd him around.
And for the top teams, like that of Astana, with the leader in the middle of the screen there, red jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, this is about getting out front, making sure you don't get caught in those winds, get split out from the back, or get involved in any crashes that may occur as a result.
Yeah, big time. And you saw there Horner just a moment ago. He was pushing Cancellara to get him back in front of him, as he wants to make sure that Cancellara does the work up there and keeps him out of the wind while he keeps himself ready to go.
Interesting to note that Fabian Cancellara, who has been the best support rider in the hills along with Robert Kieserlowski for Chris Horner, is apparently pulling out of the Vuelta after today.
Yeah, it's crazy. Joaquim Rodriguez right in the middle of your screen, 121, white helmet, white on his back. He's in there as well. It is very tough for a guy like Horner in a situation like this, Steve, not to be having Cancellara going all the way. Now Nibali at the front. Why is Nibali at the front? He has no teammates left, so he's got to just freelance it off of these other guys.
And this is a group that's a few seconds back here. Now it looks like 3 different groups, riders in between as well. The wind's doing damage as the riders anticipated they might. And the gap to our 2 leaders down under a minute for the first time. And they should be at the second intermediate sprint point pretty shortly here. 26 kilometers left to go. Haven't seen much of them recently because of what's happening back here with the field and the splits occurring. Wow, those are some big gaps that are starting to form and some big groups.
It does not take long to blow a field apart in a crosswind. And when you have some crosswinds like they have here and you get out in these agricultural lands, it is chaos. And you can see men right on the edge of the asphalt. So it's Cancellara, then it's Horner, Kieserlowski, their teammate, is a few wheels back, and I see a lot of mouths wide open just trying to get enough air in.
Well, I tell you what, in a situation like this, is there any rider you would rather have in front of you than Fabian Cancellara?
I would say no.
I mean, just perfect for Horner, who now comes to the front here.
Oh, here comes Kieserlowski to the front. He says, come on, guys, get on my wheel. Let's try and do some more damage.
And now Nibali has a teammate in front of him for Astana in the turquoise colors, just behind Horner. 25 kilometers left to go for our 2 leaders, so they've gone through the intermediate sprint point already. We are back here with the field that has split up because of the winds on this flat section.
And they just made a little bit of a turn to the right, so it means it's going to be slightly more of a cross headwind than it was. It'll make it easier for guys to get a draft. The more directly that wind is out of the side, the worse it is for guys trying to sit on.
Now back to our 2 riders in the breakaway, Hansen and Aramendia. But this group, it looks like, closing in quickly, just about a half-minute back. Cancellara back to the front, just ahead of Horner in the white jersey. On the left-hand side of the road, Nibali in the red. Horner's got 2 teammates, Cancellara in front of him, Kieserlowski right behind him. Joaquim Rodriguez on the right-hand side of the group, just going through the sprint banner. And Katusha in the red and white, multiple riders for them up there near the front of the group for Joaquim Rodriguez, who is 4th on the GC.
Guys back here, including number 13, Carlos Betancourt, the Colombian. They are just hoping that the pace eases up and they can get back into the draft, because if it keeps going like this, eventually more gaps open up, and that's why Cancellara and Kieserlowski are trying to drill it on the front of this front group. They're trying to further break it up. Now it's Katusha.
Joaquim Rodriguez attacking in the summit finish the other day on stage number 16, but still has not won a stage. Has looked a little below his best, and now fighting to just get on the podium here at the Vuelta this year. Comes into today 2:29 behind Nibali. Valverde just ahead of him on the GC, 1:14 back of the Italian. Heading west for 180 89 kilometers. They've done 2 Category 3 climbs. Now both of the 2 intermediate sprints. And all that's left, really, to break up a field sprint is these crosswinds they're dealing with and a small unrated climb 10 kilometers from the finish that'll get up to 9%.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if the crosswinds persist, and now, yeah, we've got some regrouping here, but if the battles persist in the crosswind before that little hill, that 1 kilometer or so long hill, we will not have a field sprint. We'll have all sorts of guys splintered all over the place.
Oh, Placid, number 11 for AG2R. He's caught back here in this second group. 5th on the general classification. Just behind Rodriguez as the day started. And not a guy who's built for the windy conditions.
No, he certainly isn't. Matthew Boucher, the American, also back there, struggling a little bit for Radio Shack.
All right, now back at the front in the green jersey, that is Alejandro Valverde, and Saxo Tinkoff, the team in the blue and yellow, coming to the front.
Yeah, they're there for Roach because they say, hey, Pozzovivo's not here. Pozzovivo's in front of Roach in the GC. Let's drill it.
Chance for Nicholas Roach to get up into the top 5 once again. Former leader of this race. He won stage 2 as well. Nicholas Roach just needs 5 seconds in order to get back into the top 5.
He certainly has more than that right now, but there's a lot of racing still to go. And the question is, will that lead group keep the hammer down? I have a feeling they're going to.
And Armandia about to be brought back here because of this wind battle that is unfolded in the final 25 kilometers.
And groups spread out all over the road, but a couple of big groups, as we're seeing different groups with at least 3 large groups on the roadway right now.
And the first large group about to pick up the day's signature breakaway. The handshake makes it official that it's over. They had a lead of over 8 minutes and 1 point, and now they will be gobbled up by the first group on the road.
Well, they better get ready to hold on to their handlebars because...
Hold on to that granola bar, too.
I'll tell you what, man, get that food in your system fast because the crosswind battle is fierce.
Get out of the way because they are coming, led by Saxo. Remember, Saxo Tinkoff was the team at the Tour de France on that one very windy stage that broke up the field. Alberto Contador gained about a minute on eventual Tour winner Chris Froome that day. And now here is Saxo Tinkoff at the front on a windy battle of stage 17 that's developed with 20 kilometers left. That's the first group that contains the top riders on the general classification. In fact, the top 4 are there, with Nibali, Horner, Valverde, and Rodriguez. Also the man who sits number 6 on the GC, Nicholas Roach, as well. The man who's not there is the rider who's in 5th, Pozzovivo, the Italian for AG2R. He's caught in the next group on the road.
Well, Pozzovivo is a tiny guy, and he's not a fan of the crosswinds, that's for sure. And on a day like this, they're in the saddle for a long time. Remember, it's 117 miles, so they're over 100 miles into this bike race today. And you just start to get complacent. You start sitting further back, and when it splits, you can't respond.
Well, and also something that's going to be intriguing here, what sprinters have remained in that front group?
Oh, I bet you a lot of them are out of it. Rigoberto Urán, 198, second man from the back. Second place a couple of days ago, but he's not going to be getting that today, that's for sure.
Will these breaks stay? Will they come back together? 19 kilometers left to find out.
It's blowing everybody over into the gutter, and they're getting further and further over, trying to get that draft. But when sometimes on some of the long helicopter shots we see him using the entire road, and so only some of the guys are in the draft, but everybody on the right side of this group is in the wind, and they're kind of pegged on their throttle, but yet they can't get in because there's all these other guys fighting for a position. Now let's look at the field here. At the front of the field, there are a few guys that are all drafting off of each other. Once again, it's these line right here. They're drafting off of each other, Steve. But the guys on the left side over here, they're all out in the wind. And so they're fighting to try and get over to the side of the road where there's draft. it's just this sort of argy-bargy, elbows, pushing and shoving, and then the road opens up, more guys move over and get in the draft, and you just keep doing that over and over again.
This is that front group. Nibali, Horner, Valverde, and Rodriguez, the top 4 in the general classification, are in that front group. The 2 most prominent names not in that front group on the general classification, Pozzovivo, who's 5th, and Thibaut Pinot of the FDJ team, who is 7th. They have some time to make up.
And Morkov on the front right now for the Saxo Tinkoff team. Remember, he won a stage earlier in the race. That would be stage number 6. So he's got a special jersey because he's a Danish road champion, but he's very much part of that Saxo Tinkoff team. And they want to try and move Nicholas Roach up today. And certainly the way things are going, that's looking very good.
And look at the visual gap back to the next group. Wow. That's getting bigger.
It's getting bigger. It looks like these 2 groups are going to come together.
Very interesting to see what sprinters are back here, which ones have stayed in that front group. Didn't have a lot of sprinters left in the race to begin with, but this could really change the complexity of how this stage 17 plays out from here.
And a guy like Morkov, who could win from this front group, he's on the front right now. He's not even thinking about winning the stage. He's riding for his teammate Nicholas Roach for the general classification. So he's doing these big turns on the front, even though he's a fast sprinter, because they have a bigger goal, which is to try and move Nicholas up in the general classification.
And I think I saw Tyler Farah in that front group for the Garmin Sharp team. Not positive, but it looked like he was up there. He's a sprinter that's kind of been forgotten about, even though he's had some high finishes, but has yet to win a stage here at the Vuelta this year. But if he is up there and some of the other sprinters have been dropped, don't forget about him as a potential stage winner if he can get over that final unrated climb with 10K to go.
Yeah, and Farah's a guy who was a little bit concerned about that climb, and he said, you know, today's day was tougher than it looked on the road book, the book that they have that shows all the profiles. And Matteo Bono here, looks like he's giving it up right now. So he trying to figure out which group he was off the back of there. He might have been off the back of the front group.
All right, so this is back to that very front group with 15 kilometers left to go. Saxo Tinkoff still at the front. They are trying to get Nicholas Roach back into the top 5 of the general classification. He is currently 6th. But just needs a few seconds at the finish to move back into a top 5 position.
And there's just not quite enough of a full-on crosswind to really shatter that group, Steve. It's too much of a cross headwind, so the groups are still relatively large, but Saxo Tinkoff continuing to try to break it up.
Noticed a lot of Lampre riders in that front group as well. Maybe their sprinter Max Marchese is still in that front group too. He would be one of the fastest guys in a sprint. When you think about the potential sprinters, if this somehow does come down to a pretty big field sprint, we mentioned Farah, we mentioned Max Marchese, Michael Matthews of Orica Green Edge, Macias Arntz of Argo Shimano, and Gianni Mearsman of Omega Pharma Quickstep. We just don't know how many of those names are in this front group right now with 14K to go.
And one guy who might be a real danger man today is the Sky rider, the Norwegian Edvald Boassenhagen, because he can get up a short hill very well, and he's good on harder types of sprints, and this is sort of turning into a harder type of sprint because of this crosswind battle that's been ensuing now for a little while. Now they're only a few K away from that climb, and it's the Garmin, no it isn't, it's still the Saxo Tinkoff men on the front.
Nibali has 3 teammates with him. Chris Horner has a couple of teammates as well. He's in the white jersey there near the top, sitting right behind Alejandro Valverde in the green jersey.
So those 3 guys doing a great job of positioning themselves in advance of this battle up this little hill, which is very narrow. And now the way the road turned, we should get a better crosswind, or I should say a harder crosswind, a more direct crosswind, so we may see some more guys spit out the back of this group.
known as the Castle of Burgos climb, right around 10 kilometers from the finish. There's some cobblestones on it. It does hit 9% at one point, so that could really split things up even further after the wind has already done some damage there. And the Pinot Pozzovivo group now almost 50 seconds back. It doesn't look like they're going to regain contact at this point.
No, I would say they're definitely not going to regain contact. It is on in the front of the bike race. And now Movistar coming up to the front as well with Valverde in the green jersey as the leader of the points competition. So there are way too many guys in the front group that are motivated for that second group to catch back up at this point of the bike race. Oh, Steve, the descent is very tricky. It's skinny. It's pretty sketchy. Luca Paolini for Katusha also up there. He'll probably be working for Rodriguez, but he's also the type of guy that might try something late here.
This is the front of the bike race with just about 9 kilometers left to go on stage 17, an unclassified climb that lasts for 1 kilometer. They're on the climb right now. Vincenzo Nibali, the overall race leader, has a teammate for Astana at the front. Katusha with a few riders behind in the red and white, and then there's Alejandro Valverde in the green jersey. Boassenhagen is there in the dark colors with the light blue helmet for Team Sky. Nibali's on the left-hand side of the screen in the red. Chris Horner also not too far away in the white jersey, right alongside Nibali.
Oh, that was steep right there. Painful to watch, and you can see in some of the fallout here. Horner not a real big fan of these short, steep climbs, but he seems to have great positioning right now.
Just trying to stay near the front, stay out of trouble, stay in position, not lose valuable seconds at some point.
So Astana really putting the pressure on this climb. They just want to keep it fast enough that nobody attacks their race leader.
This is the back of the group. So they'll be coming up to the summit shortly as Lampre launches an attack. Chris Horner had just moved to the front of the group, and Diego Ulissi from the Lampre team, a guy who could hang on to win the stage if he gets a gap here.
Oh, Ulissi is a very good talent. Stage winner of the Giro d'Italia a couple of seasons ago, and that really put everybody on wash that the young Italian was a man to be reckoned with.
I'm talking about the Lampre team for sprinter Max Marchese, but another option is Ulissi from distance, just like this, with 8.5 kilometers to go. But will he get enough of a margin over the top of the climb?
It's going to be very tough for one guy to make it, but the descent is favorable for a single rider as long as he's on his descending form. One of the challenges is you make this supreme effort to get away on the climb, then he plummets on the descent, and his heart rate and everything is so high that it's hard to relax and focus on the descent, and you really got to nail these corners.
8 kilometers left to go. He's gone over the summit of the uncategorized climb, now on this descent, which is technical and on some very narrow roads, and the field not too far behind. Well, Lampre certainly won't be leading the chase for Max Marchese with Ulissi up the road now. So let's see who's going to try and bring him back. With the different groups that have formed on the road because of the windy conditions earlier, you have compromised teams that don't have a large number of riders to come to the front and really control the margin and do the work to bring it back. So that can work certainly into Ulissi's favor right here.
Yeah, and you can just see how nasty the descent is as well. And in the peloton, or well, the first group from the peloton there, they're going to want to be just a little bit conservative on a descent like this. And remember that Ulissi has no impact on the general classification. He's way down in that classification. So for everybody back there, it's only the stage hunters that are going to be concerned about bringing him back, because he's an hour and 4 minutes down in the overall time.
Where it will really get difficult for him is the final 5 kilometers, because it's more or less straight and flat all the way to the finish. There's a couple technical turns, but especially once you get inside of 3K, it's almost dead straight and flat the rest of the way. So that's a long, straight, flat road that provides a difficult time for a single rider to stay away from a field.
Yeah, and to add insult to injury on that, Steve, it's predominantly headwind. And that's really tough on a single rider. But Ulissi here is giving it a go. Once you get out there, even though you only have a handful of seconds, as Cancellara leads the field, you want to keep going.
And it does look like Tyler Farrar was in that group right in the middle for Garmin Sharp. This is good for Lampre. They don't have to work to set up Ricchese in a sprint because they have Ulissi out here. But if it does come back together, perhaps Ricchese could be fresh and ready to go for whatever kind of reduced bunch sprint we might have. And now another rider off the front here, it looks like. An Euskaltel rider in the orange and black down below. A couple of riders as well at the 6K to go banner. So it looks like there's 3 riders ahead of this group, and then Ulissi at the very front. There's some other riders trying to get a gap. And one of Ulissi's teammates here. Well, this is actually Ulissi, who is coming backwards.
So yeah, he has such a small advantage now, being joined by Martinez and other men driving on the front of the peloton. Now it's Cancellara getting surpassed by what looks to me like a Garmin Sharp man. It may be Johan van Sumeren, the winner of Paris-Roubaix a couple of years back. And he's got to be thinking Tyler Farrar has a really good shot at picking up a Grand Tour stage win. And boy, it's been a long drought for the American winning a race in Europe.
Red jersey of Nibali ahead of the green jersey of Valverde. Chris Horner moving up alongside Valverde. Now Nibali in the white. So the top 3 of the general classification almost tip to tail there near the front of that group. 5 kilometers left to go. Up once again here.
It looks like Horner opened up a little bit of a gap going through one of those corners. Maybe he just took it slightly easy because he felt it was pretty sketchy and he didn't want to crash. Now he's having to close it down, but he's closed it back down.
That's second. Guys in the top 10 now, almost a minute back. Astana, the team of race leader Vincenzo Nibali, with a rider going up the curve now to the middle of the road, launching a move from the front. It's going to be difficult for any one rider to get away. No more climbing, not a lot of technical corners, mostly straight and flat into a headwind.
Yeah, they do have that one chicane. It's just a little bit inside 3K to go, where they make a left and a right, both about 90 degrees in fairly close succession. But I completely agree, Steve. The headwind and the open roads, that's what conspire against men like this who are trying to ride in solo.
Tomorrow will be a scheduled breakout. Sunday will be possible with the rest day on my community calendar, because I'll still have 2 or 3 races.
That's Ulissi at the back of the group. Now the top general classification riders, top 4 as a matter of fact, Nibali, Horner, Valverde, and Rodriguez
So
near the front of that first group. Nibali has this one teammate just off the front.
August,
as we come up on the final 3.5K.
I think my races,
What other sprinters
2 or 3 races
are in this group and ready to duke it out? Saw
I
Tyler
think
Farrar.
easy.
We believe Max Ricchese is there for Lampre as well. Ed Bostonhagen of Team Sky, he is in there. So 3 very fast riders, certainly with a chance to pull off a stage win. Tyler Farrar probably needs it the most. Hasn't won in a Grand Tour in over 2 years. Doesn't have a contract for next year. Desperately needs something good to happen to secure his place in the sport for 2014. He has won at the Vuelta before. Oh, he's just missed out on a few occasions.
The grind here on the front. I mean, you can just feel it in these guys' bodies. Everything telling you got to keep going, but they just bringing you back. The legs can't do it.
So inside the final 3 kilometers. General classification riders still staying near the front, and now waiting to see who's going to take up the pacemaking.
Now let's also remember, if there's a crash or a mechanical now, as Horner's in second position, you get the time of the group you were with at the time of that mechanical incident. So if somebody has a problem in the general classification, they don't get a stage place, but they put him in this group as the last rider.
I think that's Horner up there, second wheel.
Yeah, it was him coming around the corner in second spot behind a Movistar or
Saxo, it looks like.
Yeah, those two are hard for me to distinguish sometimes.
Now Nibali only a few wheels back. Valverde is still there as well.
And, you know, you might have to think that Alejandro Valverde thinks that he may have a shot at a time bonus here today. He's not a field sprinter, but he's fast, and this is a reduced group, so he might be a guy trying to get a few seconds in a time bonus. Remember, 10, 6, and 4. The question is, will he have the speed against the faster sprinters?
I've got to be thinking Wassenhagen, Farah, also Rakese, from the sprinters we've seen in this group, now with 2 kilometers left to go. And while Wassenhagen was second in an uphill sprint earlier in the Vuelta, losing out to Philippe Gilbert, who's no longer in the race.
Yeah, Wassenhagen's a good bet.
Astana once again coming to the front here.
Wow, 1:15 now to the chasing group, so they're losing big time.
Looks like Nicholas Roach is definitely going to move up into the top 5 in the overall. Kilometer and a half away. All flat into the finish. All right, so who wants to sprint? And more pressing is who wants to lead it out? Nobody.
That's Wassenhagen, I think, going off on his own. Really, no, that's not him as he looked back.
He's more, I think, towards the middle of the screen now, about 5th wheel.
I thought it was his figure until I saw the face when he looked back.
Tyler Farah is up there, moving towards the top of the screen as well. He's about 7, 8 wheels from the front. 1K to go banner, just over a half mile to the finish. Wide, flat, tailor-made for a sprint, but we have a reduced field of sprinters that are going to come to the line here. Who's going to lead it out? Who's going to have the speed? After over 4.5 hours of stage 17, looking around at the front, now a Belkin rider launches a move. Belkin at the very front here. They've lost a lot of riders along the way. 5 riders have pulled out for them.
And if you want to launch early, this is the time to do it because we don't have big lead-out trains. He got a good gap. Now the question is, can he hold on to it?
Wagner, Tanner, and Mollema, the only...
Okay, that will do. Quick check. Don't need that.